Hi, I'm Natalie Clark. I was the daughter who lacked direction, the one they pushed to the edge of the table, both figuratively and literally. 9 years ago, my family kicked me out on Thanksgiving night. No apartment, no insurance, $60 in my purse. They said I'd never make it past community college. This year, I walked into the OR wearing a white coat and said, I'm Doctor Clark, Chief of Surgery. Let's begin. And the patient on that table? The man who disowned me. Before we dive into the full story, have you ever been shut out by the people who were supposed to love you? The ones who watched you fall and never once reached out? Drop your story in the comments. I read every single one. Because sometimes the greatest comeback isn't loud, it's surgical. The air inside the restaurant was too warm, too still. Even the soft jazz bleeding from invisible ceiling speakers felt like a performance we all agreed to pretend wasn't happening. I sat exactly where they wanted me, at the far end of the long mahogany table, next to the kitchen door that swung open every few minutes with a blast of fried garlic and the crash of dishes. On the other side was a brass coat rack holding exactly one coat. Mine. Everyone else sat clustered near the head of the table where the lighting was flattering, the wine flowed freely, and the servers actually made eye contact. Brianna was already launching into some story about closing a deal with a tech founder from Denver, complete with mock humility and air-quoted accidental commission bonuses. I tried to contribute once. I started volunteering at a clinic near campus. It's small, but we get a lot of uninsured patients. Robert didn't look up from his steak. You mean that shack next to the payday loan place? It's a legitimate clinic. We're helping real people. Elaine dabbed at the corner of her mouth with her napkin and said nothing. I watched her fingers fold the cloth with mechanical precision. Corners aligned, creases smoothed, as if holding in a comment so sharp it could tear the linen. Jason shifted uncomfortably across from me, swirling the ice in his soda. His eyes darted between faces like he was watching a match he hadn't bet on. Robert reached for his wine glass. Natalie, we've had this conversation. You dropped out of pre-med. You're not in school. You're not working in finance. I don't know what exactly you're doing, but it's not worth continuing to insure someone who's decided to quit. My fork froze midair. What do you mean, insure? Effective December, he said, slicing into his fillet. You're no longer on the family health plan. There was a moment of perfect stillness. Even the server approaching with a tray of mashed potatoes seemed to sense something toxic in the air and retreated. I looked to Elaine. Her eyes met mine for a heartbeat. Then she gave the faintest nod and reached for her water glass. That tiny gesture felt colder than the wind outside. I didn't quit, I said quietly. I needed time to figure things out. Med school isn't just an academic path, it's a calling. I've been shadowing, studying, finding where I can still make a difference. Brianna let out a laugh, short and bitter. That's rich. You're playing dress up while the rest of us are building lives. Jason's interning at the Board of Trade. I just closed on a property in Lake Forest. You, she gestured with her knife, are the only one without a seat at the table. Figuratively and literally. A flush crept up my neck. I stared down at my plate, its untouched roast duck glaring back like an accusation. My breath caught. I wanted to scream, to flip the table, to make them see me, but all I did was push back my chair. The scrape against the polished floor cut through the hum of the restaurant. Heads turned. Somewhere a glass clinked too hard against another. Robert looked up sharply. Sit down. No. He threw down his fork. It clattered and spun. You're no longer part of this family. For a split second, no one moved. Elaine reached for the bread basket. Jason looked at his lap. Brianna examined her nails. I left. No one followed. Outside, the wind slapped me in the face. My breath fogged the air as I stumbled toward the parking lot, past rows of glittering luxury SUVs and spotless sedans. My Honda sat alone near the dumpster, a dull gray blotch in a sea of gloss. I climbed into the driver's seat and slammed the door. The cold leather bit into my back. I exhaled, long and shaking, and leaned my forehead against the steering wheel. The dashboard clock blinked 8:54 p.m. Thanksgiving night, and I had $60 in my purse. No apartment. Just a couch I'd been crashing on, but that was no longer an option. No heat, no insurance, no one. I stared out through the windshield as a light snow began to fall. Somewhere deep inside, past the aching in my chest and the fury coiled tight in my ribs, a single thought rose. Clear, cold, and solid. I'll show them. The library parking lot was quiet at 2 a.m., except for the sound of me unzipping my med school textbook by flashlight. I balanced the thick binder across the steering wheel, pages fanned open like wings ready to take flight. My pen scratched the margin beside a diagram of the cardiac cycle, the ink a little shaky from the cold. The heat in the Honda had long stopped pretending to work, but I'd learned to layer. 2 sweaters under a thrifted jacket, a scarf wrapped tight over my ears. From the outside, I must have looked like a ghost scribbling into the void. I used to believe hunger made you weak. Turns out, it makes you strategic. A granola bar sat in the cup holder, my entire dinner. I'd stashed the last slice of bread from a vet sandwich in a napkin tucked behind the glove box. She never said much, but every night around 10, she'd accidentally leave food behind in the break room of the library. A peanut butter sandwich, a banana. Sometimes a blanket with a note that just said, "Stay warm." During the day, I worked the graveyard shift at a gas station on Route 6, restocking shelves, wiping down coffee machines, nodding at strangers who never really saw me. But in the mornings, I changed in the gas station bathroom, scrubbed my face raw, and drove straight to the Sunrise Free Clinic. Dr. Halverson didn't ask many questions. Maybe he knew. Maybe he didn't want to know. But he let me shadow every shift, gave me tasks when he saw I could handle them, and once even left me alone with a patient whose records were a disaster. I sorted 2 years of labs and medication notes in under an hour. That day, he looked at me like I wasn't invisible. And then came Mr. Dupree. He was uninsured, diabetic, and had run out of his meds. The clinic could only cover part of the refill, and the pharmacy wouldn't process a second subsidy under his name. So I took the cash I'd earned cleaning the station bathroom tiles that week, walked to the counter, and gave a different name. R.A. Callahan. The pharmacist nodded, typed it in, and handed over the bottle like it was nothing. But to me, it was a baptism. That name, Callahan, was the steakhouse where everything ended. So I made it the name of everything I was going to become. R.A. for my initials, Callahan for the scar I chose to turn into armor. After that, I started using the alias more often, for online courses, for volunteering records, for small payments from outreach programs that didn't require ID. I didn't want my family name trailing behind me like a ghost. I needed a clean slate. A week before my birthday, I opened my inbox outside the library in the same spot I always parked. The email header read, University of Chicago Pritzker School of Medicine, admission decision. My fingers hovered. Then I tapped. Accepted. My breath caught. The world didn't spin or explode. No music swelled. Just silence. Streetlights. A car passing in the distance. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred, and for the first time in years, I cried without biting my lip to stop it. I pressed my forehead to the steering wheel. I thought about my mom's silence, my dad's fork hitting the table, Brianna's smirk. I thought about the cold metal seat, the coat rack, the mashed potatoes I never touched. And then I reached into the glove box. My old insurance card had been there for months. I'd kept it stupidly, like maybe they'd changed their minds. Like it meant I still belonged. I took it out, struck a match from the gas station stash, and watched it curl and blacken in an empty coffee cup. I don't need their coverage, I whispered. I'll be my own safety net. The flames died with a hiss. Ash clung to the sides of the cup like memories that wouldn't quite let go. Far away, in a clinic system I didn't know I was connected to, someone logged into the Mercy Ridge database. The name, R.A. Callahan. Just a shadow in the system. For now. ChatGPT, Jun Noi. 9 years later, I stood at the nurse's station, stethoscope around my neck. When my past walked in wearing scrubs, the halls of Mercy Ridge buzzed with the sterile rhythm of the night shift. Monitors beeped their lullabies. Carts squeaked over polished linoleum. I reviewed the 3 a.m. surgical schedule like I always did. Methodically, precisely, impersonally. Until a name flickered on the new personnel list. B. Clark. I froze. The clipboard slipped just enough to betray my grip. There was only one person who ever called me Natty. She just clocked in. I turned toward the HR kiosk at the end of the hall. The fluorescent lights above her buzzed faintly, making her features look sharper than I remembered. Brianna, in light blue scrubs 2 sizes too big, with her hair pulled back into a bun that tried too hard to look careless. She fumbled with the tablet, fingers tapping nervously. I watched her from behind the glass wall, veiled by reflections and my own disbelief. She didn't see me. Not yet. A nurse called out my name. Formal, professional. Dr. Clark, patient 312's post-op drain isn't holding suction. I nodded, snapped back. I'll check it. I moved through the floor like I owned it, because I did. Not in name, maybe, but in influence. As chief of surgery, people stepped aside when I passed. But none of them knew the Natalie who once studied by flashlight. That version of me lived in shadows, and I'd buried her deep beneath pressed coats and published journals. An hour later, I crossed paths with her again. She was walking toward the med supply room, eyes focused ahead, a clipboard clutched like a shield. She didn't notice me until we were an arm's length apart. Then she paused. Her head tilted slightly. Confused. Studying me the way people study dreams after waking. Familiar but not placeable. Our eyes met for half a breath. Then she moved on. I stood still, exhaling slowly. My hands, steady in surgery, trembled in my coat pockets. Later, at the end of shift huddle, I reviewed charting expectations. It was routine, until it wasn't. Also, I said, flipping the page, make sure all patient progress notes are co-signed by your assigned attending. If you're unsure who that is, that's Natty, Brianna said without thinking. The words fell like glass. Everyone turned. She covered her mouth, blinking as if she could rewind time with her eyelids. I mean, Dr. Clark, sorry, I didn't realize. I didn't move. I didn't blink. Silence stretched, sharp and fragile. I nodded once. As I was saying, your attending will sign off on notes by 10 a.m. I finished the briefing, collected the forms, and walked out. No one dared stop me. Down the hall, I heard whispers start. Heard Brianna's breath hitch. Heard the sound of recognition settling in her bones. Our eyes locked. For the first time in 9 years, she saw me and wished she hadn't. My father came in unconscious, prepared for emergency surgery. No one knew the chief surgeon was his failure of a daughter. I adjusted the sterile gown, the rubber gloves tight against my skin. The operating room lights hummed above, too bright, too cold. The storm outside rattled the windows, a heavy rain slamming against the glass. Inside, everything was silent but for the low murmur of the surgical team setting up. I stood at the head of the table, my eyes scanning the patient's vitals on the monitor. Heart rate, blood pressure, oxygen saturation, normal. Then I looked at the name on the board. Robert Clark. A name I hadn't heard in almost a decade. Not since he kicked me out. His words sharp like blades. You'll never amount to anything. You won't even make it past community college. 9 years ago, he told me I'd never make it past community college. Tonight, I'd hold his heart in my hands. The patient's heart rate spiked, a fluttering, irregular beat. I pressed my fingers into the cold steel of the table, steadying myself. I couldn't let this affect me. Not now. I gave a quick nod to Dr. Reed, the anesthesiologist, and Nurse Carl. Let's begin, I said, my voice as steady as it always was in the OR. Scalpel, I requested. I sliced through the skin with the precision that only years of training and hardened resolve could produce. The incision was clean, methodical, just the way I'd been trained, the way I had to be. I could feel the sting of memories creeping in, but I swallowed them down. I couldn't afford weakness. Heart stabilized, I called out as I gently manipulated the heart tissue, ensuring proper blood flow. Brianna stood near the counter, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the surgical instruments. She glanced up at the monitor and then back at the board. I saw her pause, her gaze faltering as she read the surname on the board. Her lips parted in disbelief. Dr. N. Clark, she whispered, but it wasn't quiet enough. I didn't look at her. Not yet. The sterile smell of blood and antiseptic filled the room. Brianna was frozen for a moment, but I couldn't afford to acknowledge her shock. I focused on the incision, on the rhythm of my own breath, on the task ahead. The heart rhythm faltered again, and I pressed the paddles to the chest. Clear, I ordered, the words sharp and quick. The body jumped as the electrical charge passed through. He stabilized. His heart, his failing, fragile heart, was still. I could feel Carl's eyes on me, his silent observation. His soft voice broke the tension. "You okay?" he asked, his tone laced with concern. I nodded, even though I wasn't sure if I was. But I couldn't let him see it. Not now. Brianna was still staring at me, her confusion turning into realization. She must have pieced it together by now. The daughter, the surgeon, the same woman who had been thrown out. The woman they'd written off as nothing. She didn't say anything at first. But then, as the surgery wound down, I caught her staring at me. Tears welled in her eyes, blurring her vision. She whispered, as though the truth had just hit her, the weight of it sinking in. "You saved him." She trailed off, her voice trembling. "After everything?" I didn't respond. My hands moved quickly as I finished suturing the incision, maintaining the cold, clinical detachment that had always been my armor. I could hear the storm intensify outside, its chaotic rhythm mirroring the turmoil brewing in my chest. But I didn't let it show. I saw it in Brianna's eyes, though. That look. It wasn't just surprise or confusion. It was something deeper, something I hadn't expected. Shame. As I closed the last stitch and nodded to Dr. Reed, I turned away from her gaze. I didn't need to see it. I didn't need to respond. But as I walked out of the operating room, leaving my father behind in the sterile light, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just crossed a line I'd never be able to erase. The past was there. It had always been there. But now the storm outside raged louder than ever. "You paid for my medication?" my father said slowly. "Under the name R.A. Callahan?" The room was dim, sunlight barely pushing past the blinds. Monitors beeped in soft, indifferent rhythm. He was propped up in bed. Pallor faded slightly, but his voice still had that controlled weight, like every word had to pass a gatekeeper in his mind before it left his mouth. I stood at the end of the hospital bed, arms folded, white coat still on, name badge plain as day. Dr. Natalie Clark. He hadn't looked at it. Not really. Denial was a funny kind of anesthesia. Mercy Ridge Pharmacy had called earlier. Something about a patient flag. A discrepancy in years of prescription payments tied to a name that didn't exist on their insurance registry. That name was one I hadn't uttered aloud in years. R.A. Callahan. Carl had handed me the printout just before visiting hours began. He didn't ask questions, just placed the file in my hand and said, "You might want to be the one who explains it." So here I was, explaining the unexplainable. My father leaned forward, wincing slightly. "I don't understand," he murmured. "You, Callahan, was you?" I nodded. For nearly 6 years. Brianna sat rigid in the corner, arms around her knees, eyes flicking between us like she was watching a bridge catch fire, one she might have once walked across without looking. "You had rheumatoid arthritis," I said. You couldn't afford to let your insurance lapse. The meds were expensive. You wouldn't have accepted help from me, so I didn't offer it with my name. I placed the folder on the tray in front of him. Those are pharmacy receipts, digital correspondence, patient portal screenshots, all under R.A. Callahan, all routed through the outreach programs I volunteered for. You passed every compliance check because I built the alias to pass them. He said nothing, just stared at the papers. Each page another nail in the coffin of his old certainty. Elaine walked in halfway through, perfect posture, leather gloves still on like she wasn't planning to stay long. I came because Jason asked, she said without meeting my eyes. Jason trailed behind, looking smaller than I remembered, though he must have grown taller than me years ago. He gave a soft nod in my direction but said nothing. Elaine sat beside the bed, crossed her legs, and glanced at the folder. So, she said coolly, what do you want, Natalie? It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. I stepped back, calm as a scalpel. I don't want anything, I said. I came to explain so there wouldn't be confusion, so you'd know who you were thanking when you said I saved your life. Robert flinched. I continued, each word deliberate. You disowned me at a steakhouse in Iowa. You canceled my insurance. You told me I was a failure who didn't belong. I left with $60 in my purse and slept in my car for 3 years. I worked the night shift at a gas station, showered in public restrooms, and studied by flashlight. Brianna's breath hitched. I saw it. Jason looked down at the floor. I shadowed doctors, volunteered at free clinics, wrote essays for scholarships under 2 different names. I got into med school on a false ID because using my real one meant being traced back to you. And disqualified. Elaine's lips pressed into a line. You lied then. No, I said, stepping closer. I survived. You lied. About loving me. About supporting your children equally. About who deserved a seat at the table. Brianna stood, her voice shaking. She never gave up on us, she whispered. We gave up on her. Elaine didn't flinch. She never had. I turned back to Robert. His hands gripped the sheets like he needed to anchor himself. I didn't come here to save you, I said, my voice calm, the kind of calm that only comes after a storm has hollowed you out. I came here to say goodbye. Silence flooded the room like a second presence. He reached out, slow, unsure. His fingers brushed my wrist. You're, he began, voice breaking for the first time I could remember. The strongest person I know. I pulled back, not harshly, just enough. Enough for him to understand that strength wasn't an invitation. Not anymore. I didn't leave the hospital because I was angry. I left because I was finished. The words on the screen were simple. Just 2 paragraphs. No accusations, no melodrama. My resignation letter read more like a weather report than a declaration of freedom. Precise, factual, final. I hit send. Outside my office window, Chicago's spring skyline shimmered under a veil of gray clouds. Mercy Ridge Hospital rose behind me in glass and steel, indifferent to the choices that had just reshaped my life. My phone buzzed. Dr. Min, Hopkins. This time I answered. He looked tired, but pleased. The offer still stands, Natalie. Chief of minimally invasive surgery. Full relocation package, no strings, no ghosts. No ghosts, I repeated, tasting the words. That's a first. Take a few weeks, he said. But just know, we want you, not your resume. You. After the call, I gathered the last of my things. An old coffee mug, a pen I stole from Dr. Reed years ago, and a cracked stethoscope I couldn't quite let go of. I zipped the duffel, not bothering to double-check the drawers. I didn't owe this place a pause. Jason was waiting near the elevators. His shoulders were hunched, like he didn't know how to be taller than me. His hands shoved deep in his hoodie pockets. I read everything, he said. All the records Carl gave me. The RA meds, the shadowing hours, The tuition receipts you paid in cash. I nodded. There wasn't anything left to explain. He looked up, eyes glassy. I'm sorry I didn't speak. Back then I should have said something. You were a kid, Jason, I said gently. I don't blame you for surviving. His jaw tensed, like he wanted to cry but wouldn't let himself. They're not the same now. I mean, they pretend, but something broke. They broke it, I said. Not you. We stood there a moment longer until the elevator dinged. I hope you visit, he mumbled, wherever you end up. I smiled. I hope you never have to. Downstairs, the cafeteria felt smaller than I remembered. The same peeling sign about nut allergies, the same humming fridge. But this time, when I passed the nurse's break table, they stood. Not all of them. Just a few. No applause, no words. Just a nod. A quiet, steady kind of thank you. I carried it with me all the way to the lobby. My phone buzzed again. Elaine Clark. Incoming call. I watched the screen blink 3 times. Then I put the phone face down and kept walking. That part of my life didn't require closure. Just silence. The air outside tasted like new rain and the first hint of lilacs. My new apartment wasn't far. 10th floor, north-facing balcony, exposed brick, overpriced everything. But the view? The view was mine. Chicago stretched beyond the balcony railings, lights flickering like a pulse. My pulse. I pulled out my phone and opened the voice recorder. For once, not for notes or patient memos, just a message to no one. I walked away not to punish them, but to protect myself. I hit save. Inside my duffel was a photo, one my mother framed when we still pretended to be a family. I looked at it for a long moment. All of us in front of the Christmas tree, pretending warmth. Then I walked 3 blocks to the river, past neon reflections and the echo of passing trains. The water below moved like muscle, steady, uncaring. I held the photo over the railing. This is not the end of the story, just the end of theirs and mine. And I let go. What began as exile ended in quiet emancipation. Natalie had walked into the night with $60, a battered car, and a heart freshly wounded by those who were meant to protect her. No safety net. No support. Just hunger. Both the literal kind gnawing at her ribs and the deeper one. A hunger for dignity. For 9 years, she didn't scream. She didn't plead. She didn't send angry letters or knock on locked doors. Instead, she built, piece by quiet piece, a life no one believed she could. While they sat comfortably at tables of tradition and privilege, she studied under flickering library lights, folded gauze in emergency rooms, and signed pharmacy bills under a name born of humiliation. She didn't ask for revenge. She asked only for the chance to prove them wrong. And she did. Not with public speeches or vindictive glory, but with the scalpel in hand and integrity in place. She saved the man who disowned her, not because he deserved it, but because she did. Because her skills, her ethics, her oath to heal transcended the cruelty that tried to break her. In that operating room, under sterile lights and stormy skies, she became more than the daughter they had discarded. She became the version of herself no one saw coming. Justice doesn't always arrive with sirens or headlines. Sometimes it wears scrubs, walks softly, and lets the truth speak through actions rather than accusations. Natalie never needed an apology to validate her worth. But the look in her father's eyes, the awe, the regret, the fractured pride, was a verdict in itself. It was the silent confession of a man who realized too late what he had cast away. The world rarely punishes the cruel in ways they deserve. But life has a subtler system of accountability. In Natalie's case, it wasn't just that she survived without them. It's that they had to witness her thrive without their permission. That was the true reckoning. And when she finally walked away, resigned not from bitterness but from completion, she rewrote the rules of what power looks like. Sometimes the strongest form of vengeance isn't revenge at all. It's peace. The kind earned, not inherited. The kind built by refusing to become what tried to destroy you. So, what is the lesson then? Perhaps it's this: silence in the face of injustice isn't humility, it's surrender. But truth, carried with discipline and patience, is heavier than rage and cuts deeper than cruelty. Natalie's story is a quiet anthem for anyone who has ever been exiled by their own, by families, companies, institutions that couldn't see past their narrow definitions of success. It reminds us that worth is not bestowed, it is proven. And that legacy isn't what you inherit. It's what you endure, what you overcome, and what you build when no one is watching. Like the final chord of a long-forgotten melody, justice may arrive late, but it resonates more powerfully once it's heard. And when it does, it doesn't need applause. It needs only to be known. So to anyone still sitting at the edge of the table, wondering if you'll ever be seen, remember this: sometimes the seat they refuse to give you is the very reason you build your own house. And sometimes walking away isn't the end. It's the beginning of a story they no longer get to tell. If this story stayed with you, hit like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to remember. Being cut off doesn't mean you're done. It means you're about to begin.